Good evening, superstars. Good evening, legends. Hey, Peps and the great Thom Roker back for part 5 of our pre-season 2025 outlooks. And we are looking at 3 teams that are on the precipice of doing something potentially exciting or potentially forgettable. And we're talking about Port Adelaide, we're talking about Richmond, and we're talking about St Kilda. Big Dog Tommy, great to have you back on board, mate. Our first 4 videos have gone off the charts. And like I've said to everybody, listen, our last video, our beautiful part 4, 85% of our viewers haven't subscribed to the channel. So can I ask a massive favour? I know that you're loving the content that we're putting together. So can you just hit that little subscribe button down the bottom? Because the more people we have, the bigger the channel gets, and that means the bigger guests we can have, and the better community we've got too. So I'd love if you just touch that little subscribe button, and then you're going to get the content that we build every single week delivered to you personally. Hey, Big Dog, I can't wait to talk about this first, Bob, which is the Port Adelaide Football Club, because let's be honest, they've caused some issues over the years, and I have a question for Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide, the team, Port Adelaide, your supporter group. And it is simply this. Without Houston, do you have a problem? Because it is Kenny's final year. Last year was another finals failure. It's got to be grand final or bust. We must start to beat the top 8 teams consistently and at the end of the year and end it on a positive note. Now, this year, you're going to see what the list Port has put together for the next 5 years. A lot of young ones coming through, and we've had some older ones move on as well. There are still a few dogs out there, but fundamentally, the team has plenty to look forward to. When you've got a midfield of Rosie, Butters, and Horn-Francis, you got the ski double up, Aaliyah in the back line, and you got Mitch Georgiades at the front. There is a lot to like about Port Adelaide and their potential for this season. But the question has to be asked, will the Houston Rocket be shot to the sun and send Collingwood to the finals, which we don't think is going to happen? Or, without him on the launch pad, will Port be able to hit an atmosphere of success? Over to you, Tom. What do you think?
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. Port Adelaide making headlines in the pre-season that... They really, I guess that they've been, this transition plan sort of coalesced after a fair while. Then finally they pushed Kenny out the front and said, the Port fans are all there going, oh, boo-hoo, it's the longest time that the coach has not made a grand final and not lost their job. Well, guess what? In the current era we're in, there's 18 clubs, and you've got to be better than 17 clubs. And Port have been better than 14 or 15 clubs at a time, haven't quite made it. And we can usually, in hindsight, see what's the reason Dixon wasn't fit. Well, he's gone, so that excuse is gone.
Yep.
So they brought in the Coaches, like they said they would, 7 years ago.
Who, the Coaches?
And they paid a pretty hefty price. They paid basically next year's pick one
to get him in,
and lost Dan Houston, and they got Jack Lukosius and Rory Atkins in with the deal. So I like Rory Atkins. He's a great guy to have around. He actually did a little podcast for the Suns and chats with the Rat. And, he's very well liked. He's one of Tuke Miller's good mates. So, he wasn't getting A-grade footy, so he's gone down there. But Peps, what are we thinking here? We know their midfield's very good. You didn't mention Ollie Wines or Travis Boak.
No, I didn't.
Who have been the mainstays of their midfield for a long time, because they're no longer the number one guys. You didn't mention Willem Drew, who
I like a bit of Willem Drew.
I believe he's related to Jonathan Brown, and he kind of plays like it. He's not quite as big though. But I don't know. I've just got some questions about Port this year. Now I want to point out one reason why I feel like they have overachieved, especially last couple of years. And that is, we've got 23 games in the season nowadays. And that extra game is gather round. So that's a gimme to Port each year. It's a win. So like they might as well just put it up there on, right now, 4 points. Because they're not going to lose gather round. It's not going to happen. They're playing Hawthorn though, by the way. So, anything could happen. And then they get 12 more games at Adelaide Oval. And only two of those are obviously against the Crows. So one of them's a home game, one's not, but what's the difference? Maybe there's a bit of a crowd advantage. Yep. But this is my point. There are 11 home games where they're playing a team from interstate, where they have the absolute home advantage. Now, all those 10 Victorian teams, they do play more in Victoria, but there's so many neutral games that are played there. And only the very best Victorian teams can be seen to getting an advantage out of it. Geelong does, because they've got that home ground advantage down there. And teams like Collingwood and back in a few years ago, Richmond had that MCG advantage because they got all the blockbusters.
Yes.
Melbourne have cashed in on that. But Port have arguably got the biggest advantage in the comp. And if they can't capitalise on that, even if they make it into 7th or 8th, they're going to be gone. They need home finals. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
They get that, and they finish higher and they have home finals, and it takes them through to a prelim, and then good night. Thanks for coming.
I think when it comes to Port, they've got to get that consistency. We've spoken about their midfield quite a fair bit over the years, especially J-Dog, who's the co-host with the most. We'll see him 8 p.m. every Monday on the Lace Out live show. And he's been very critical of the way that they've performed, even when they've had their good runs. He keeps saying that in Can We Trust? I don't think he trusts him whatsoever. See, that's another story in itself. They're basically saying, hey, you know what? We're going to hand the reins over at the end of the year to Carr. But why wouldn't you pull the trigger now? Like, they don't believe in him to re-sign him for next year. So why wouldn't you just go, well, if he's no good, why don't we just get rid of him now? Even the way that why? What's he going to learn under another year? Are they trying to give him a farewell tour? Like, his farewell tour is going to be longer than, well, you could say that they're going to pay him out. They only have to pay him out a maximum of, it is 12 months. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have given him last year.
Get the work.
Yeah, I know. It's just, but even the way that they play, I don't know what they stand for. I don't know what their identity is. Port used to be hard, I wouldn't say ruthless, but they used to strangle you quite a fair bit. They were very dangerous down forward, and their backs would restrict.
In your defensive 50, and eventually send the goal back over your heads, demoralise you, especially in Adelaide. That is the Port that I didn't see that much of last year.
And they used to strangle you down there. Like, going to Port was almost a loss in itself. Unless you were playing like first-class quality football, there was no chance of you beating Port. You didn't want to go over there. And they've been pretty susceptible to be getting beaten over in Port. Where even prelims that they shouldn't have lost. They've lost at their ground, and it shouldn't happen. And so, like I said, you look at their midfields, you Hall Francis, you got Butters, you've got Rosie, like Rolls Royce, 3 of those, okay? And I think Hall Francis could even, if he keeps his head right, he could be all Australian this year. And there's a few that have sort of come out of different clubs that I've noticed through the first set of trial games that have really sort of stepped up a bit. And I noticed him in the game the other night that he did. You've still got Wines running around. You've still got DBJ, big fan of Darcy Byrne-Jones. You've got Sam Palpepper coming back as well too. So you've forgotten that. So there is a really good nucleus there. You've got Burgoyne who can run around. But then you lose Houston. You've really got Asava, Radaglia, and Alia. Are they, like, is that a backline you can build a premiership around? I'd probably say no. From a forward line perspective, I'm a little bit concerned as well too, because Mitch Georgiades, he still kicked 44 goals last year, but who else is down there to really kick another 30 with the group? as well. Chad Wingard was the guy down there for a while, but then he faded out. Is Willie Rioli going to be that guy? Is the guy who was at Essendon, I keep forgetting his name. He always tore us apart when we played. Went down there, I think, last year. It'll come to me in a moment. Are those small forwards going to be able to dominate? Dixon's not going to be down there anymore. And so it almost feels to me that unless their midfield have a Sydney-like performance and each of them are going to kick 30 goals this year, I'm concerned where they're going to really dominate from a scoreboard perspective. They use the ball by foot a hell of a lot. And when you're on a bigger ground like the Adelaide Oval, you can do that. They were 17th for handballs last year. They were 15th for disposals per game, 12th for goal assists, 14th for rebounds. So they don't rebound it out as much. So their midfield is doing a lot of that strangulation work around the middle of the ground. And it's basically, once we get it, we're either going to kick to a contest or bang it long forward. They don't use that chain and run handball. They use that more run and gun off the opponent and try and make space. But we've seen you need to have a blend of both, because teams are smart enough to push their wingers out, push their forwards back a little bit, have someone sitting at that halfway mark between that 40 metre kick. So you're either going to have to try and get through that defence, or you're going to have to go over the top. And I'd love to see if they chain up their handballs a little bit this season as well too. Their contested game was brilliant. Like, they were ranked second for tackles last year. And fourth for hitouts, fifth for kicks. So they're getting their hands on the ball. If they haven't got their hands on the ball, they'll tackle, they'll put the pressure on, they'll get it, and they'll kick. They don't work it out. Where other clubs, I know Carlton like to go out the back of the contest quite a fair bit. Brisbane are a very, very decent kicking team as well too. Fremantle a little bit like that one as well. But then you've got other teams who really like, Richmond in their glorious days used to run it out, handball, chain it through the middle of the ground. Collingwood would chain it through the middle of the ground. So I think you need to have a blend, and unless they change the way that they play, teams are going to be able to read them a lot, and it's going to put so much pressure on their midfield to be kicking goals outside 50 because they're not chaining it up through the middle of the ground, and that just puts more pressure on Rioli. Fantasia was the one I was mentioning earlier on. So I'm a little bit, I don't know where they are. I just don't know where they sit.
Carlton these days.
Oh. And the interesting thing is that they only had 6 players play every game last year. Bergman,
that was the
Bergman,
big thing.
Yep.
Was
Very serviceable. Batters, DBJ, Willem Drew, Jackson Mead, and Zerk Thatcher has been really serviceable since coming over from Essendon. But Butters won their best and fairest. Horn Francis was second to Lear, Connor Rosie, Dan Houston. So the usual names dominated again. Who's going to stand up? Who's going to, which is the real Port Adelaide? I would love to see it. I'm not too sure where it's going to come from.
Well, they moved on a group of older guys.
They did.
So Tom Cleary, Charlie Dixon, Trent McKenzie, a couple of ex-Suns in there, and Dan Houston, of course, asked to be traded to the Pies. So,
well, he actually was going to Melbourne, remember? And then didn't want to go for cultural reasons, ended up going to Collingwood. And we saw what happened, who Melbourne picked up in the draft. They picked up Lindsay and they picked up Langford. So it's, are you playing for the now or playing for the future? I think I know where I'd like to be with the midfield that I've got at the D's.
Yes.
Collingwood are looking at it a little bit differently. Yep.
Houston's a loss, and they haven't replaced him. But if Jack Lukosius is sort of going to be the guy that replaces Dixon's goals, can't replace Dixon's chop out in the ruck, but let them sort that out. And they've got Finlayson for that.
Yes.
Then you've got Houston's kicking, field kicking.
Yep.
We know that Lukosius has good field kicking, but we also know that he thinks he's a forward, and he's probably a half back. But you kind of need to have a couple of lockdown defenders. Well, they've got those.
Yep.
So they could play him as that third loose tall. I'd actually like to see him play on the wing. You put him out in the wing, and you're like, okay, isolate Jack. Try to get him the ball in space as much as possible.
Like I said, I think I referred to him as Jack Watts 2.0 because of the Lukosius loquacious way that he plays.
But there's been a lot of 5-goal hauls that he's had.
Yep.
When he's on fire, he's on fire. He's a very confidence-driven player. I mean, I've watched every minute he's played. Even when he got dropped to the VFL, and it was the first time he'd ever played reserve grade, apart from might have played 1 or 2 reserve grade games when he was a junior. Anyway, he played a lot of Sandford when he was a junior. But and he came out and kicked 5 goals and had 30 possessions and 17 marks and all this crazy stats, because he's obviously not, he shouldn't have been dropped really, but Dimmer didn't have a choice. It was like, you come out and we don't know if you're going to get no goals or 5 goals. So he had to go, and that was to Port's advantage, even though in the whole wash up of everything, a lot more has gone out the door for Port than has come in. But they did also get Jack Whitlock, who isn't going to be a win-now player for them, but we like him.
Yeah.
He's a decent player. And the player that all the Port fans really, really, really wanted was Joe Berry.
Straubs.
At pick 15, a lot of people were saying he's one of the most AFL ready. So, they could have a couple of guys just to slot in and immediately make them competitive, but I don't see it all just clicking immediately unless Carr has really been given the keys to the car. Pun wasn't intended, but
that's all right.
You see what
I will give him. Can I give him some credit though? They've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players over 29, which is. And 4 of those are over 30. One of those is Boak. The other one's Rory Atkins, so I wouldn't worry about him. 2 times, Alir and Ollie Wines, which is a really nice mix. Okay, so, Boak will probably finish up at the end of this year. I'd love him to get the 400. That would be magnificent. Alir, he plays backline, so it's not as taxing as a full crunch and punch. So, and he's got he started a little bit later. He's only played 156 games. But what I like about them is that if you go down to the bottom end, they've actually blooded their kids really nicely. So, I'm looking at guys. So, Jace Burgoyne, 36 games, and he's only 21. Jason Horne-Francis, 21, but he's got 65 games into him. Lockie Jones, 56 games into him. Miles Bergman, we spoke about him. He's 23, 83 games into him. You got Butters, Lukosius, and Rosie, all at 24 and just on 25 at 119, 116, and 129 games. These kids have got pre-seasons into them. They've got probably another 7 years left in them as well. That is your next crop. So they've got them playing regular football. And then, like I said, your Darcy Byrne-Jones, he's 29, but he's 200 games. I don't know what to think of Todd Marshall. I think that he's in a real, he's going to be out for the first part of the season.
Yeah, he's soft, isn't he?
What is he? Is he Port Adelaide's Tim English? Literally, is he Port Adelaide's Tim English? They've both got virtually the same haircut, and they seem to go down with the same injuries at the same time. So I'm a bit concerned there. What's Ivan Soldo doing?
Well, Ivan Soldo, you have to remember, just was the plug-and-play guy because Dimmo wanted to have taller players.
Yep.
So he brought in Tom Lynch, put him up front with Rewald, and he put Soldo in the ruck with the Nank.
Yep.
And they did a bit of a dual ruck thing, and it worked for them for a couple of years. And then when it wasn't working anymore, Soldo got shifted off. Remember, he's a want-away as well, and the guy's only played 65 games. He's not a veteran. I mean, he lost his role to bloody Jordan Sweet. So Jordan Sweet couldn't get a game behind Tim English. So exactly. We're not talking about elite ruckman here.
No, we're not.
That could be, but they do have a lot of height. And they do have a young fella by the name of Dante Visentini coming through, who's there's a couple of them. There's brothers, the Visentini brothers, who are good sort of rucks. Who people are talking them up. It takes a few years, so I wouldn't have said that they've got A grade ruck stocks, but at least they've got a competitive kind of up, and their midfield's more than capable of winning the clearances despite not having the tap.
Yep.
I don't think that's the problem, but I guess Peps, what it really boils down to is you get clubs like Geelong, who very rarely stay down. Every 10 years or so, they miss the finals, and they're right back up there. And sometimes teams like Geelong and West Coast used to do it, but now they've really...
Yeah, they bottomed out.
But what you see it often when a team has this renewal, that they can sort of manage to patch it together during the season. I mean, it all came together for Hawthorn last year. It all came together for Brisbane when they sort of went, we've got all these injuries, and we've got a few players who just, they aren't as good as they were last year. Piff them, replace them, blood some new guys, try some new things, change the game plan. Bang, they won the flag. So if Ken's on the bench, calming down Horn Francis when he gives away a 50-metre penalty, having a chat to the young players about the difference in speed between SANFL and AFL, and Carr's up there in the box calling the shots and formulating the game plan around this team that's now his to take forward.
Yeah,
that's how they're going to make finals in my mind. I don't think Ken is going to be, reflecting in his memoirs that, oh yes, they gave me one last year and I, did everything the way I always did it, and of course it was the master plan, and we won by 100 points in the grand final. That ain't going to happen. Ken's going to be sort of afterwards saying, oh, well, it was my time to go. I'm just glad I was able to see it come to fruition. But personally, I kind of see it going down before it comes up.
Yeah, I'll look at Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide, do you remember they had a really fascinating year in 2023 where they started off awful. I think they lost 2 out of their first 3 games and then went on a winning streak of 13 in a row and then lost 4 in a row and then made finals. And sometimes when you do things like that, you can ride the high through the middle of the season, but then you've used so much physical energy, more mental energy, that it just collapses. And I feel that's what Port Adelaide do. I don't think they manage their mental side of things enough when they get to the back end and it starts to pay off. So I'm fascinated for Port Adelaide because they can either do what they did last year. I don't think they're top 4. I can see them making the 8, but I can also see them finishing in the bottom 6 as well.
Yeah,
because if they won a lot of games by less than a goal, how many of those games are they going to lose by less than a goal? And we know there's only a fine margin between making the 8 and falling in a complete heap as well too. So,
look, perhaps their depth relies on kids.
Yes,
and so if some of these best 23 players right now, if they lose their position to form or injury, and you don't wish it upon anyone, but it's already stacking up for every club that they've already got an injury list, and for some clubs it's already getting up into the double figures.
Yeah.
So we're going to see that happen, and then whoever comes through, if they're losing games because their quotient of A-graders, experienced players, jobbers, but then there's guys running around getting 5 touches because it's their first game. Those are the kinds of things that Port can sort of get away with, but because what do they come? 3rd or 4th? They have one of the most difficult draws in the kingdom, apart from the home game advantage.
Exactly. And like I said, we do this in virtually every video where we say who their ski double ups are, and that's where I think that's where finals are made or lost. Their double ups for this year are Sydney, so you could probably see them maybe splitting those.
Maybe.
Hawthorn.
Oh.
Yep, splitting those maybe. The only one at home.
Adelaide.
Not after what we saw the other night. Geelong.
Oh, my goodness.
Freo. And Carlton. So you couldn't ask for a more nightmare double-up draw, but that's what happens when you finish in a prelim final. So sometimes it's better to not make the top 6 than it is to make the top 6, if you know what I mean, too. So... like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd love for you to do us a favour because, like I said, the last video, 85% of people who watched the video weren't subscribers. So just do me a favour, touch the subscribe button, join the Lace Out community, be part of it because it means that our videos get sent directly to you. You don't have to search us down. You get to watch us live, 8 p.m. every Monday night starting in a couple of weeks. It would mean a lot to me. It would mean a lot to the channel. It just means that we get bigger and we can provide more content like this for you. Rightio. I'm looking forward to talking about this team because just a number of years ago, they won 3 out of 4 grand finals. And there's been a lot of change at the Richmond Tigers. But really, when I look at it, Tommy, when it comes to Richmond, my promise is, can you please channel young talent time? Because Dusty will leave a massive hole. So will Baker. So will Bolton. But regardless, this year is all about building a foundation that is with the talent that is left from the Premiership era. Taranto, Hopper, and including the new Sam Lawler, Josh Simmerley, Taj Houghton, Jonty Falls, Luke Traynor, and the rest of the 2024 draft class. We know that they are going to finish last, and we know it's going to be challenging for them. But remember that those Premiership heroes of 2017, 19, and 20 were young cubs once who grew into ravaging beasts. Adam Muse needs to be Johnny Young, and he needs to give his young crop of future superstars time on the park so they can develop into the next Jamie Redfern, Vinny D, and Joey Peroni. This next group in time will ambush the league once more, but it won't be in 2025.
No. Look, this is the stark number, okay? They have only 6 players 30 and above, and all of those players are Premiership legacy players. Then you've got Jaden Short, 29. I reckon he'll be around for a few more years. And Noah Bolter is the only young fella who remains from that 2020 Premiership. Everyone else is retired or been traded. So, you know, you've got a few guys who are around. I mean, Hopper and Taranto come across from GWS, and they've got, you know, they lost the grand final to the Tigers. They've brought some talent in across the years. There's no denying it, Peps. They're building. They are rebuilding. They've got an extremely good list management team, but you've got the 2 oldest players, Dion Prestia and Tom Lynch, who are Suns foundation players, both pissed off for some premierships. They can't stay fit. They get paid so much money to do nothing, and it's really they get their Dusty money back, but Tommy Lynch is still
on close to $1 million a year, wouldn't he?
$5 million this year. You've got guys like Nathan Broad and Camden McIntosh who they're not A graders. They're not even B graders anymore. They're C plus. Nick Vlostone, he was, next level, but he's on his own. He's Pat Malone back there, and then you've just got this whole list of some of the guys who've stuck it out and been there for the long haul, but with 7 major players last year leaving or retiring, and they came last with 2 wins with the Dusties and the Sean Boltons and all those guys, and they're expecting to be competitive without.
Well, they were, let's put this into the statistical side of things, all right? Now, there are that many things that they were on the low rankings for. We could spend 25 minutes going through it. But you're not going to go anywhere, and this is where you sort of got to put things in perspective. There's a difference between not trying and having bad results, or being honest with yourself and going, you know what? Look at our list. It's poo. They're young. We've got old, young, and whatever's a void in the middle. But they were 17th for kicks, so they couldn't even touch the ball. They were 17th for disposals. They couldn't get their hands on the ball. 15th for marks. 18th for points. 18th for tackles. So they couldn't get their hands on the ball. They couldn't tackle anybody who had the ball. And if they did get the ball, they didn't do anything with it. They've got a void between their ups and downs. And so with all those stats, like I said, you look at what they did, and I'm like, I don't know. That's not going to get better this year. And so you'd say Adam Muse is a bit of a dead man walking. You've got to give him faith, right? Like, you can't just boot him because they're not getting results. The club's got to go out and say it's going to be hard this year. I think the supporters know that. Only 8 years ago, they just won 3 flags. All right? It took us 57 years to get one. Other clubs have been waiting a lot longer as well too. So, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's going to be tough for them.
I think that these days with the coaching kind of thing, the clubs all, they don't exist in a bubble. Well, they do actually, but they don't exist in a vacuum is what I was going to say.
Yep.
So they're observing trends, and the trend is a Stuart Dew type thing where they get a coach and they come, look, we're garbage. We need to replace players, and it's just up to you to work out which players you can use. And then go in there and we'll tell you which ones can do this and that. Yep. Spin the magnets, and if you're showing a bit of improvement, we'll keep faith in you. Yep. And then they had a change in leadership at the club, and they got rid of him a month and a half later. So I don't think that's going to happen with Richmond. I think Uze's probably got 4 years, and often. When you keep having these garbage season, the fans are calling for their heads, but you really do need it. And you saw what happened with the Paul Roos transition, and that was the most successful transition since the first transition from bloody Barras.
Well, it was interesting when you say that, because I remember a lot of people saying, "Why would you barrack for your club when you're that bad?" I said, "Listen, I know it's bad, but the good times are going to be so much better."
Yeah.
And it's come from Brisbane. They did the hard yards for many, many years. Port haven't been able to get over the line.
Yep.
So once you get that success, you want more of it. And I know the Richmond supporters want it. But you've got a great crop of young kids that have come in. Not all are going to make it. But if your top 4 picks can really dig in, mate, you've got a core of a midfield that are potentially going to play 200 games. You're going to say that's pretty handy. And then you're going to have another set of draft picks again this year and the year after that as well too. So they've got to try and get the picks in as soon as I know that they've done a bit of a swap with somebody else.
No, but Peps, the spectre of Tassie.
That's what I'm saying. That's why they need to get as many of these kids in now for that spectre of Tassie, because it's not going to be easy once they come in as well too. And I'd love to hear what the people think in the chat. Are we right? Are we wrong about Richmond? I just think it's going to be tough, and if you have a look at their double ups as well, like it doesn't get easy. Like even you'd say, it's an easy double up games. Well, there's no real easy games in football these days. Not even West Coast in West Coast is as easy as it once was. But Richmond,
they're a year or two ahead of Richmond.
But Essendon twice, West Coast twice, Gold Coast twice, and Kilda twice, North Melbourne twice, Geelong twice. Outside of probably Geelong, you'd be pretty happy about those double ups. Could be worse, but I would say Gold Coast is not going to be easy.
Hey, can I give you an interesting stat there, Peps? The last time Richmond beat the Gold Coast was before their last premiership.
Okay, so it's been a bit of time.
And now the Gold Coast have a positive record against Richmond, which is pretty extraordinary when you think of where the Suns have come from. We've never made finals. Richmond won 3 premierships, and the year they didn't win a premiership in the middle of that, they were minor premiers, and everyone thought they were going to win it easy.
Yep.
And the Suns didn't get a look in that little era. But Dimmer will go down as the coach who lost the most games against the Suns without getting sacked. And now he's got the Suns, and he's piling on the losses for the Tigers. It's a rivalry, mate.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's interesting though as well.
All our players, and now we're taking their coach. And
they took their best and fairest. Daniel Rioli went up there. So yep, and they also lost Liam Baker as well too. Got to remember that he went over to West Coast. So they've lost that experience, 1 and 5 in the best and fairest. Yeah. Their leading goal kicker was 34 goals, 25 behinds, Shai Bolton. The next best was Ryan Mansell at 21. So you've lost 34 goals. I don't know where they're going to get 34 extra goals from. So there could be some very ugly score lines this year.
They will. And what they've got to do is just play as many of the players as they can. One of the things that Richmond does really well is they keep a very strong VFL list.
Yes.
And so those younger players that they've got are going to be playing with the same system in the VFL as the AFL. And so you'll see them on Thursday night and they'll be like 6 players out, 6 players in, because you can do that. And if you have a 100-point loss, and I'm not suggesting they're going to lose by 100 points every week, but as you just said, it's going to build up to that.
And as a new coach, you can do that as well, too, because you need to know who can play. Dimmer did it last year. How many times was he throwing the magnets around trying to figure out who's going to be here, who's not going to be
38 players he ended up using.
Yeah. So
and the players he didn't use are gone.
It's going to take its time. It's going to be tough. There'll be players who will be just going, yay, for them. I don't think anybody wants to see a club go bad. There's clubs that you don't want to see win, but you don't want to see clubs getting smashed every week. And no one will take any pride in seeing Richmond getting smashed every week. And if you do, have a hard look at yourself.
You said something last week, which is that the big Victorian clubs, that the Bombers have fallen out of that.
Yeah, I'd say the Bombers are not a Big Four club anymore. No, not in Victoria. From a supporters, yes, but not from an on-field success. No.
Well, it wasn't too long ago that Richmond fans were saying, yes, we've always been Big Four, but they were resting on the VFL laurels. I don't count those flags. AFL flags, that's how the fairest way to compare all 18 teams is to, and some clubs have had fewer seasons than others, but that's the new table, AFL era, and they are firmly up in the top echelon.
Oh, no doubt.
That with
no doubt.
3
no
now.
doubt. Yeah, they're
and 100 plus thousand fans, members now,
yeah.
But they don't want to slip back out of that.
They will, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine. They'll get there. They'll get there back.
Brisbane from 2003 to 2024. Well, 20 years to get back to a grand final. But I mean, there's other factors going on there. So you can compare. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
I think they probably have the list management. The club has lost a bit of talent in the front of house because that tends to happen after you've had a dynasty and things that you need to have that change.
Yes.
And if they keep the quality going and look at their draft, the pick 1, pick 7, pick 11, 12, 14, they've gone absolutely berserk, and they've secured North Melbourne's first rounder for next year. Like they're well and truly on the rebuild, but there's not one player out of that group who's going to pick him up and put him on their back as an 18, 19-year-old.
No.
Maybe he's a 22-year-old, but that's many years in the future.
You never know. We might come back at this time next year and go, wow, I never saw him doing what he did, being a first-year player. There's always one player that stands out at a club and go, wow, he's future captain written all over him too. So,
well, we like Sam Lawler,
yes,
even though he's broken his
jaw,
bone or jaw.
Yeah.
We like Josh Smillie, he's a big mid, so let's see him come along. Taj Houghton is injured, but he'll come along. John T. Fall, big fella.
Mm-hmm.
They need, and Harry Armstrong, another big fella. They need a couple of the big boys. Thomas Sims, very big boy.
They did go the big route, didn't they? Once they got their sort of midfielders who was best available, they then went almost key position because that's probably what they need. They need forwards and they need backs.
Yeah, you can't sort of go, is Noah Bolter a forward or a back?
He's
got to make a decision. Got to replace Lynch because if he plays every game this year, it'll be a medical miracle. He has not played much footy at all at the back end of his contract when he's getting the seven-figure sums. No. He was getting $500,000 a year during their flag times. Now, and they back-ended it by so much that he was $6 million over 7 years.
Yep.
It was $4.5 million over the last 3.
So, Richmond are rebuilding. Richmond are stripping the guts out of this joint, and they're just going to be starting from scratch. And we all expect that, and we all wish them nothing best for the year. I've got to say this, though. Pardon, mate?
As long as the Suns keep beating him, because they gave us some bloody hidings over the years.
I understand.
And there's been some brilliant... I love the rivalry. I love it, because they hang shit on us, and now we're giving it back to them.
Well,
and
you want to talk about... Like very much. I don't know, but if you want to talk about a team whose supporters have stuck fat, have abused, and love it 1 minute and can't stand it the next, and we're talking about building, we're talking about the St Kilda Football Club right now. And when I come to the St Kilda Football Club, I think they need to promise their supporters one thing. And for this year, 2025, they need to pull the scaffold down. So what do you stand for, St Kilda? No, really, I am confused on the type of team that you are. Are you a contested team? Are you free-flowing? Are you a restrictive machine or a fast-running link-up juggernaut? I've got no idea, and I have no idea. And I hope you've got some idea. You were 15th for points per game, goal assists, 17th for clearances, 18th for hitouts, and centre clearances. Yet, you finished the last 8 games with a 6-2 record. You are such a tease. Ben King's shoulder is as weak as Elbow's re-election hopes, and they still rely way too much on the jacks of Higgins, Steele, and Sinclair. So, way too much. And I'm not sure anyone really fears you. You've made the finals 3 times and won 1 since 2012. It's time to stop rebuilding and start living in the top 8. Your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, St Kilda is this classic team. Essendon do it a bit. Carlton were doing it a bit. But those teams that hover just around the 8, sometimes they get in there and sometimes they're out. The Bulldogs more often scrape into the 8. They won the whole thing from 7th.
Yes, they did.
You know, like these clubs, they're never going to get better unless they just clear out the list and pile up the draft picks. And I feel like St Kilda did this because they did get their 2 top 10 draft picks. Okay?
Yeah, but let's be honest about that. They got 1 because they finished in the position that they did. Which
you know what? Only one.
And the AFL thought.
Goal in it.
Yeah. And
if they had one less goal, they would have been improved by 2 draft positions.
But then the AFL, because of the way the magic herbs and spices works out, that they were given a first round compensation pick, which was after their president had a bit of a suki lala about it.
Yes, suki lala, and they've changed the father son and academy matching stuff, which is gonna. You just know it's gonna end up biting them on the dick.
You know what? I hope it does because
if they get someone like a Mac Andrew through their NGA and they've got to match a bid at pick 5.
Can we not mention Mac Andrew every single podcast, because every one of these episodes.
Wayne or
there you go. Thank you.
Maybe they'll get a Jambara Ugal Hagen, and
they won't be whinging them, will they?
All their picks, because now it takes a lot more picks, a lot higher picks, a lot more value to match those high bids. So you just know it's going to get them, and they're all going to scream about it.
And you know what it is, though, mate? Look, I've had this conversation with lots of people. I've had this conversation with you. I've had this conversation with J-Dog throughout the year. St Kilda supporters. And I ask them this one question, even mates. I said, look, who would you rather be? Would you rather be what Richmond are doing right now, who won grand finals, stripped the guts out of their club, and are going to rebuild again? Or would you rather be in no man's land, otherwise known as the friend zone, where nothing really happens. Nothing good happens in the friend zone. And that's what I feel. That teams like St Kilda are. They're constantly in the friend zone. They're never going to seriously challenge, and they never bottom out. So what are you doing? I don't know what they're doing. They've picked up a couple of rippers in the draft, don't get me wrong, and they've also picked up from the Doggies, Jack McRae. I don't think he's going to help, but I can understand why they've lacked success since those. They should have won a flag in 2010 and 9.
Hawkins got a goal when it hit the post. The bounce of the ball with Milne.
I love Wingani Malira. I think he has been a real bright spark for them. We know what Sinclair and Steele bring. Callum Wilkie continues to bring his work down back. Rowan Marshall, would you say he's a top 5 ruckman in the league when he's on? Yes. Can play forward as well.
Yep, and he's mobile.
Yep.
And they're talking about putting him more forward. And this SSP Sandfall ruckman Harry Boyd they got in has been played today in the ruck in the practice game. if they can get some sort of dynamic kind of thing going there, and have the big fella in the forward line when Max King, the lesser of the King twins, gets back on the park, he can't continue to be their focal point, because even though he's a cracking contested mark, when they double team him, he's just nowhere, and then it's ball's gone back up the other end, and they get nothing to show for it. They need multiple avenues. Membry's gone, and so he was often the guy who'd keep them in things and kick a little handful of goals and be leading up for a smaller sort of key forward. So they really need those kind of guys to
and they've lost their run with Battle as well too. And then you have a look at some of the names and you think they're either on the way out or where are they? So Brad Hill, he wouldn't have much left in the tank. Jimmy Webster wouldn't have much in the tank. Mason Wood, funnily enough, who was almost completely Kaputski, has revitalised himself on the wing. Jack Sinclair, don't worry about him. Zach Jones is still running around. We've spoken about Marshall. Jack Steele, love what he brings. Callum Wilkie, Dougal Howard. Like, these are all their upper echelon who's going to be playing. Dan Butler, Zane Cordy, Jack Higgins. Up until Jack Higgins, everyone's 27 or above.
The problem is Peps.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys I just mentioned are injured.
Yep.
Injury prone.
Mm-hmm.
And after that first, I mean, there's an argument to say that they have 5 A-graders. And then other people will say, well, Jack McRae's not an A-grader anymore, and you probably agree. Maybe Sinclair at All-Australian best. Rowan Marshall, we just said. Callum Wilkie, it's probably not too generous, like he has.
Yep.
I mean, come from nowhere. So, that to All-Australian, so that's good. Jack Steele, maybe not quite. Messiah Wangani Malera probably will be, but
he's getting there. He's all right. I'll give Mitch Owens. He's on the precipice.
So they've got
Mateus Philippou, like.
Yeah.
Like,
but is it enough? And you can't just rely on 25 players to carry you all the way through a season. You're gonna have a few. Ross Lyon will put a few players, and he plucked Caminiti from out of nowhere,
yes.
and but there's guys in there with injuries like Paddy Dowse just had a horror off season. I don't expect to see. In fact, I don't even think.
Stocker.
I think it'd be a miracle if he plays in a game.
I would love to go through this list. And I should have done this before, but this club seems to have... They're almost the John West Football Club, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Because they buy anyone who's available.
Because...
It's not best available, it's just who's available.
They're the team of everyone who's been rejected. And like you can go through this list. Hill, Wood, McRae, Zach Jones... Dougal Howard, Dan Butler, Higgins, Dow, Stocker. Jack Carroll.
I mean, high draft picks, some of those guys.
Yeah, some of them, yep. That's probably the main ones, yeah. But then they've got people sitting down the bottom here. Alex Taru. You've got Toby Tavalia, so you've got the Flying Viking who's going to be there. You've got Alex Dodson that they've brought on as well too. So they've brought in some good quality kids. But once again, I don't know where they are. They're not going to threaten. They're not going to make top 8. People think that they can. They've got to change the way that they're playing. And it was fascinating to see that Ross Lyon brought a real defensive mindset to them at the start of the year. And then for whatever reason, as soon as they weren't able to make finals, he almost took the shackles off them and let them run rampant. And they were, like I said, they won 6 out of their last 8.
They actually, at several stages in that run home, still had a mathematical chance. Not that even their most ardent supporter was giving them that chance, but they kept on winning.
Yep.
And it came down to the very last day, and by that stage, most the final 8's set, and most fans have given up on their team if they're not going to be playing finals. But I was watching the live ladder, and it was going ding, 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 and then St Kilda kicked the fatal goal that put them.
Mm-hmm.
Because what was going to happen is they were going to fall below the Gold Coast on the ladder and then get their extra bloody compensation pick for battle and pop the Gold Coast back 2 spots. So, I mean, the Suns wouldn't have given a shit. They would have just given it to Richmond for Rioli anyway. But it's just very St Kilda-y, isn't it?
Yep.
Where they, you know, they could have thrown the last game.
Why again? Why'd you do it? It was almost like what North did when they won that game, and they could have had Harley Reid, and they screwed the pooch on that, but they did end up getting Wardlaw and Sheasel, so it's not exactly that there. But they had 6 players play every game last year. One of them was Josh Battle. So Mr. Reliable's no longer there anymore. We spoke about Tavaglia. We talked about Taru, James Barrett, Hugh Blockshaw. I haven't got my glasses, so I can't read this small writing.
No, you're right. Look, they're going to be all right. The new talent that's come in, it's those 2 top 10 guys. Yep. Taru and Travaglia, and they look like St Kilda players of old. Blonde hair, they're tall.
Do all right. The social club, Teva Barker style as well too.
And Dodson was touted as perhaps the best ruckman in the draft, and Harry Boyd was the best ruckman in the Sandfield last year. So they have strengthened their ruck division. Old man Campbell goes up to the D's, but apparently he tailed up Sherry today anyway. Right. So, you know, the old, you'd never count out the old boys, but he wasn't advancing St Kilda. So they've done well there. I think McRae comes in and replaces Crouch. It's a lot.
Yeah, that'd be about right. They're double ups for the year, Western Bulldogs.
Yep.
Interesting. With all everything that's been going on, but the thing is that they don't play the Western Bulldogs until round 6. So they might be over their injury concerns by then. So you probably would have liked to play them a little bit earlier. Fremantle. Interesting. Geelong.
That's a rivalry. Saints and Freo.
Geelong.
We've had the Siren Gate, and we've had the
grand finals.
The draws. Yep. They've played in finals. They hate each other.
They got Melbourne twice. They got Richmond twice, and they got GWS twice. So it's not a bad mix. I reckon they go 50-50 split on those.
A little bit of it. I mean, look, Ross the boss, right? So the guy is arguably the best coach to have never won a grand final. And he's been in quite a few of them.
Yep.
And he lost grand finals with the Saints. He lost a grand final with Freo. He had a minor premiership with both, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
So he knows how to coach. The argument is that when he first came to St Kilda, he inherited that list from Grant Thomas and just ran with it, which is kind of true, but it's still.
Yep.
And he's had a very interesting sort of coaching pathway, because he was one of those Fitzroy players who went up to Brisbane, and they loved him up there, but his career was pretty well shot by then. But he sort of got a little bit out of the experience of going up there and seeing how the Lions kind of did manage that merger and become a good team. He went to Sydney and played and was coaching under Sydney under Roosie. And that's how, and they won a flag with him and Horse as the 2 major assistant coaches. So he knows how to win them, and it just hasn't all happened for him. I don't think they're getting rid of him, but I also don't think that he's going to be a 5-win coach. I think he gets this team up to double figures, but as we saw last season, 23 games.
Friend zone, buddy. Friend zone. It's a friend zone, Tommy. Sit with 11 wins. Friend zone. Trust me, I've been in there way too long. The other thing is that Jack Higgins kicked the most goals on 36. Then you got Tim Membry on 30. So now you have to find another 30 goals. Outside of that, it was Mitch Owens and Max King and Cooper Sherman. Where are they going to make up another 30 goals this season? I've got no idea.
Well, maybe Rowan Marshall in more of it. That's where they're going.
I think if Dodson gets in early and gets his spot, then maybe they decide, Marshall, you've got to go forward, especially if King's shoulder starts to go again. We know that he's had dramas with that. But when I look at everything and I think, on the day, this team could almost beat probably anybody on their day at Marvel. Outside of Marvel, I don't think people are worried about. They play Marvel really well. I don't think they play the G all that well, and I don't think that they go too well around the country either. So they're going to have to bank their Marvel games. Otherwise, it's going to be another ugly season for St Kilda supporters. And as they would say in the classics, Groundhog Day. That's what it's going to be.
Look, the future's looking good for them because they've done this sort of on the run list reconstruction, because they keep on having these mid-table finishes and scraping into finals, but not going anywhere and doing it. And they brought some good talent into the club. Ironically, NGA talent. Go figure. They think that's all unfair. But I think the top half of their list is very serviceable.
Yep.
Once injuries start to get into that, the bottom half of their list is the big question mark. And I don't think it's this year for them. A year's a very long time. And they did have that sort of positive end of the season last year. And a good Ross Lyon team will probably start with at least as many wins as losses and keep sort of tracking around there.
I just think I would love to see them think about what they did at the end of last year and build off that. Because if Ross doesn't evolve, he's going to die. And that club's going to die another season. And then we'll be doing 2026 and 2027. And it's like, like the old school where you get those forms where you used to write on them and then you'd peel it up and there'd be the carbon copy straight underneath. And then it'd be in triplicate. Well, that's how St Kilda go, is that you got 2025 on top, and then you peel back, there's 2026, and there's 2027. They just look exactly the same, no difference, it's just in triplicate. And that's what they're being doing.
So 2027 is the pink year.
Are they making finals?
It's still, bottom six.
Bottom six?
I mean,
they're not making finals.
You can win 10 or 11 games and come bottom six. It's going to get to that certain point of the season where Ross Lyon is going to have to be like, okay, what does the match plan look like from here on in? Am I still playing my very best players with the best chance of getting into that, creeping into the finals? Or, are they humming and we're just a couple of idiots?
Yeah, I don't think they will. I think there'll be a bit of dramas with this mob, and I think, I can't see them kicking scores. I don't know where that's going to happen. There's going to have to be a major reshift, and they're not playing finals. And I think you're right. If you've lost a running halfback and you've lost yourself there, your second biggest goal kicker, I think it's going to be almost, I'm ashamed to say it, bottom four, bottom six. That's as simple as it gets. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is our part 5. This is our part 5 season preview for the Richmond Football Club, Port Adelaide, and St Kilda. Do you agree with us? Yes or no? Write it in the comments below. If you think there were a couple of duds, let us know. But if you think we're a couple of studs, make sure you send us a kiss in the chat as well too. But more importantly, like, subscribe, ring the bell. It means a lot to me as the host of Lace Out. J-Dog will be back with me. I want to thank the great Tommy Roker, the superstar that he is, for joining me again. We've got one more to go. One more season preview, and we know who that's going to be. We're looking at the Sydney Swans, we're looking at the Western Bulldogs, and we're looking at the West Coast Eagles. 3 teams who, I think potentially 2 of those 3 could play finals, or they could all fall on a heap. We don't know, but we'll tell you all about it in our next video. From behalf of me and the great man Tommy Roker, I could ask you that question, my friend. How do you want your footy?
Lace out.
And so do I, everybody. Have a great evening. Thanks for watching. Take care. Enjoy your footy like we do.